Greg stared down at the crinkly pack of Pop-Tarts resting on his desk. It was a little past morning announcements on a fairly ordinary Tuesday in second grade. He had already eaten the first Pop-Tart and had the second one still sitting in the wrapper. This was his only snack for the day, aside from lunch. His parents did their best to be careful with money, some months balancing right on the edge, living paycheck to paycheck. That meant some days were single snack days. Greg knew he had around 2.5 hours until lunch, and his stomach already murmured faintly. He also knew that after lunch there would be another long stretch of 2.5 hours before school ended. He was certain he'd be hungry again then. Staring at the shiny, colorful sprinkles dusted across the sweet frosting, Greg debated with himself, balancing the comfort of eating now versus the discomfort of hunger later. His present craving wrestled with the imagined pangs of future hunger. After a quiet moment of thought, he took a deep breath, carefully wrapped up the second Pop-Tart, slipped it into his small snack container, and then tucked it into his backpack. His stomach grumbled in protest, but Greg stood firm. Throughout elementary school, this simple act, saving half while desiring the whole, became a recurring decision, shaping a mindset that would come to define Greg's entire approach to life. Around the same time, he began helping his parents with chores more regularly. They decided to give him a little money for extra work he did around the house, and Greg eagerly accepted. Even though they couldn't afford to pay him much, he wanted to do more and earn more. So he started offering help to neighbors and family friends too, raking leaves, washing cars, mowing lawns, or carrying groceries. He didn't have a specific goal for his savings, but he liked knowing that he was prepared. He wanted to have money on hand for rainy day adventures with friends or for those irresistible toys he saw in TV commercials, the ones that stuck in his mind long after the ad was over. As Greg entered middle school, he became increasingly dedicated to his schoolwork. He realized that doing well in school mattered for his future, so he threw himself into studying with almost religious focus. He reviewed his notes, completed his homework diligently, and prepared for every test as best as he could. The problem was that he wasn't naturally talented at academics. Getting good grades was a real struggle for him, except in art and music, where his creativity flourished. Between the time he spent on schoolwork and the side jobs he did for family friends, Greg began skipping out on many of the things other kids did for fun, playing outside, spending hours on video games, or hanging out after school. Slowly, the pattern of work over play became second nature to him. By the time he reached high school, Greg's focus had shifted again. He realized that he wasn't likely to become a doctor, an engineer, or pursue any career that required a college degree. Instead, he set his academic sights lower, aiming for C's, accepting D's if he had to. It wasn't about giving up, it was about redirecting his energy. Passing was good enough because it allowed him to dedicate more time to working part-time jobs outside of school, gaining real-world experience, and saving money. He took on any job he could get: landscaping, bussing tables at local restaurants, helping out at a small pet store, or cleaning yards. He worked early mornings, late evenings, and weekends. By the time he was 16, Greg had saved up more money than most people his age. He didn't spend recklessly. He drove an old, used car that his grandfather had passed down to him. He didn't splurge on new clothes, gadgets, or trendy things. He turned down invitations to expensive outings with friends. Every time temptation crept in, whether it was buying something unnecessary or indulging in a momentary pleasure, he could almost hear the echo of that future hunger from his childhood, warning him to hold off, to save. After high school, as his peers headed off to colleges and universities, Greg kept working. He took a position as a retail sales associate at a high-end electronics store. He was good at it, patient, knowledgeable, and quietly driven. Knowing that time was his greatest advantage, he made a mission of accumulating, saving, and investing as much as he could. He made his own coffee at home, packed lunches daily, and carefully tracked his expenses. Every month, week, and even day, Greg pre-planned his finances and his time. He optimized everything, from his commute to his sleeping schedule, to make sure nothing went to waste. He made sure that every hour he spent contributed in some measurable way to his personal growth, whether financially, mentally, or physically. Over time, he began to see fewer of his friends. He knew this was part of the deal. Success required sacrifice, and he accepted it. He told himself that he wasn't chasing balance, he was chasing freedom. Freedom from worry, from debt, from dependence. Not anything specific, but the ability to do anything he wanted in the future, because anything could happen, and he wanted to be ready for it. By his mid-20s, Greg had climbed the ladder to a regional sales support role at a large electronics distribution company. On the side, he began to share his financial tips online. It started as a simple blog, posts about budgeting, saving, and investing. Soon, he started making short videos to accompany them. His content gained traction. People liked his disciplined approach and his practical mindset. Within a year or two, his small following grew into a modest audience. Not long after, Greg started earning income from his content. Ad revenue, sponsorships, and brand deals. Within just 3 years, he managed to leave his day job entirely, becoming a full-time content creator focused on financial literacy and personal discipline. By age 32, Greg's life was what many would call a success story. He owned 2 rental properties, had a large emergency fund, and maintained a strong investment portfolio. He'd built a stable, lucrative career from scratch. His parents were immensely proud of him. His peers admired him, often with a quiet sense of envy. By every traditional measure, Greg was wealthy and successful. In fact, he could have retired early if he wanted to, or at least taken a break. He could have slowed down, traveled, tried new things, or explored hobbies outside of work. But Greg didn't. Instead, he doubled down. He continued optimizing, improving, building, and earning. He fine-tuned every part of his life. His diet, his sleep, his supplement routine, his exposure to sunlight, his caffeine consumption, even his daily schedule. He declined invitations that interfered with his habits, even if they sounded enjoyable. His life became a meticulously designed system aimed at longevity, efficiency, and financial growth. Then, one day, while trying to open a bottle of one of his health supplements, Greg noticed something strange. His grip felt weak. He struggled to twist the cap open. He had been working long hours and felt slightly dehydrated, so he dismissed it as fatigue. But over the next few weeks, the episodes continued. His hand would occasionally go weak or numb. Concerned, Greg visited his doctor. After several tests and consultations, the diagnosis came: carpal tunnel syndrome, a nerve compression in the wrist that causes pain, numbness, and weakness in the hands. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was a frustrating setback. Greg decided to make some upgrades. He bought an ergonomic keyboard, a vertical mouse, a proper desktop setup, a large desk, and a high-quality office chair. He added a wrist brace to his routine. It took some adjusting, but soon enough, he adapted. His workflow returned to normal, at least for a while. Then, during the filming of a video intro one day, Greg suddenly felt his legs buckle. His new chair nearly tipped as his weight shifted awkwardly. Frustrated, he got up, but his legs didn't respond. For a few seconds, he was frozen. Then, just as quickly, the sensation passed. He stood up, confused but relieved, and chalked it up to exhaustion. He restarted filming, determined not to waste time. A year later, on June 3, 2022, Greg uploaded a very different kind of video. The title read, "Just Diagnosed with ALS." In the video, Greg's usual calm, confident tone was gone. There were no sponsor segments, no jokes, no edits, just a raw, unfiltered confession. He sat still, his face pale and distant, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and emotion. He explained that after nearly a year of confusing symptoms, misdiagnoses, and countless medical visits, doctors had finally identified the cause: young-onset ALS, a progressive neurodegenerative disease that damages the nerve cells responsible for muscle movement. His voice trembled as he spoke. He described how his body had begun betraying him, how the smallest tasks felt heavier, slower, and harder with each passing week. Greg talked about how strange it felt to live a life built around control, efficiency, and planning, only to be faced with something he couldn't plan around. For years, he had worked to secure a future that now suddenly seemed uncertain. He had saved his Pop-Tart for tomorrow, but tomorrow had changed. The comments under the video filled quickly with messages of support, disbelief, and heartbreak. Viewers who had followed him for years couldn't imagine the disciplined, unstoppable Greg being struck by such an uncontrollable force. His story, of a boy who learned to save for the future, had reached a chapter that no one saw coming. But even in that moment, as his voice faltered and his hands shook slightly, Greg's message remained clear. Preparation can't stop life from happening, but it can help you face it. And for Greg, that lesson, the one he learned all those years ago with a pack of Pop-Tarts, had come full circle. He acknowledged how uncommon the diagnosis was for someone his age, but explained that life and illness don't always follow the expected rules. He said that the condition would slowly take away his ability to walk, speak, eat, and finally breathe. He shared that doctors estimated he had roughly 1 to 3 years left to live. After this video, Greg didn't post much content. Once every month or two, he would upload a short, unscripted update about his condition and how things were progressing. On November 17, 2022, he released a video titled, "The Future Can't Hurt Me Now." In the video, Greg sat in an electric wheelchair. Behind him stood 2 wooden easels, each holding a canvas covered in fresh abstract paintings. They looked recent, as if painted within the last few days. Greg gazed directly into the camera and said softly, "Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I'm not sure how many more videos I'll be making, but I really wanted to get this one out." He paused for a moment and cleared his throat, a small, deliberate act that seemed to fight back tears. As most of you probably know, I've dedicated most of my life to personal finance, investing, and all things related to preparing for the future, optimizing life, time, and freedom. I don't want to imply that any of that is wrong, or that I made a mistake, or that others shouldn't plan ahead. Of course, there's no way I could have predicted how my life would turn out. No one can. Maybe, in a different version of life, I could have lived to be 100. But I'm realizing now that my approach to uncertainty might have been part of the problem. My entire life, Greg continued, I believed that freedom meant having as little stress about the future as possible. Yet, despite everything I did, I ended up living almost entirely in stress about the future. It hovered over me like a heavy storm cloud, dimming every sunny day. I was always worried that something might go wrong, that I wouldn't be ready or wouldn't have enough when it mattered. I assumed there was always some ideal end of the day I had to reach, some perfect point when things would finally be safe and complete. I managed to acquire money and freedom, he said quietly, but I didn't really do much with either. I saved, protected, and prepared for this imaginary future that never actually arrived, and looking back, it was never going to. I'm not saying don't be thoughtful. I'm not saying to live recklessly or ignore consequences. What I'm saying is to remember that the things you plan and save for should also happen sometimes. If they never do, it's like building a fortress around yourself, only for that fortress to become a beautifully decorated prison. You get celebrated for it, but you never really enjoy it. You stay locked inside, trapped by the same habits and fears you were trying to escape from in the first place. He took a breath, his voice growing steadier but more emotional. You can't free yourself from your own chains by making sure they're secure, and you can't constantly worry about the future and still expect to live meaningfully in the present. Greg looked down briefly, the weight of his words filling the space. Then he looked back up, his expression calm but tired. In truth, he continued, I don't know how much of the present you should give up for the future, or how much of the future you should give up for the present. I really don't. That balance is impossible to perfect. You'll almost always get it somewhat wrong. But if there's one thing I'd say now, it's to at least get it wrong in both directions. Don't live entirely for the future, and don't live entirely for the moment. Let yourself mess up on both sides, because that's probably where real balance lives. Live wrong on purpose sometimes. He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Eventually, something bad will happen to every one of us. That's just how life works. And if you're scared that something bad might happen, then maybe it hasn't happened yet. So, for me, it's clear now. Every single day is the best I'll ever feel, and the strongest I'll ever be. And that's exactly how I plan to live. Greg paused again. His gaze fell for a second before returning to the lens. I guess that's all I wanted to say, he said softly. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I'll try to answer what I can. I'm wishing you all the best. See you soon. He leaned back in his wheelchair, gave a small sigh, and used a voice command to stop the camera recording. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of his equipment. Greg turned his head slightly toward a small side table next to him, where a half-empty water bottle and a pack of Pop-Tarts sat. He reached out slowly, picked up the bottle, and took a careful sip. Then his eyes shifted toward the Pop-Tarts. Even after all these years, they were still his favorite snack. He opened the packet, pulled one out, and took a bite. Strawberry frosted, the cheap sweetness brought a spark of comfort, a brief pulse of life in a body that was failing him. He stared down at the remaining Pop-Tart in the wrapper. His stomach growled faintly. He was still a little hungry, but he also knew, somewhere deep inside, that he'd be hungry again later. So he left it there, resting quietly beside the water bottle. Thank you so much for watching. Life constantly asks us to balance between enjoyment and restraint, between now and later. It's a fragile line we walk every day. The same idea applies on those nights out with friends and family, those nights when a few drinks can make the next morning feel like a sacrifice. That's where this video's sponsor, ZBiotics, comes in. It's designed to help you find that balance, to enjoy your night without giving up your next day. When we drink alcohol, a toxic compound called acetaldehyde builds up in our gut. This byproduct is one of the main reasons we feel terrible the morning after drinking. ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered pre-alcohol probiotic developed by PhD scientists that helps break down this toxin before it causes harm. Essentially, it supports your body's natural process, setting you up for a smoother tomorrow. For me, ZBiotics means I no longer have to choose between a good time and a productive next day. I can responsibly have both. If you're skeptical, I completely understand, but it's helped me and thousands of others who've shared their positive reviews online. Plus, ZBiotics offers a 100% money-back guarantee, so if it doesn't work for you, they'll refund you. No questions asked. Just remember to make it your first drink of the night and always drink responsibly. You can try it yourself by using my link in the description for free shipping and 15% off your first order. And, as always, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.